Well, hello and welcome back to another episode of the Safety Brief. I'm your host, Elizabeth, and today we're mixing things up a bit. We're going to be doing a deep dive in what we like to call the BLOKWORX Toolbelt. Joining me today are our two BLOKWORX cybersecurity experts, Mike and Matt. Thank you both so much for being here as always.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. So to kick things off, let's break down the BLOKWORX cybersecurity stack. This might take up a good portion of the episode, but it's important to help our community fully understand what our products do in terms that everyone can kind of relate to. So we often talk about acronyms like MAED+EDR and SCUD+CDR, but not everyone knows what they stand for. So for each service, I'll state the name, and you two can give a short, full breakdown and description of the service. For our video platform audience, we will be sharing some visuals from the BLOKWORX website associated with the services as well. So if you are an audio only listener, you may want to pull up blockworks.com and follow along. To set this tone, I'll start with MAED+EDR. It stands for Manage Advanced Endpoint Defense plus Endpoint Detection and Response. It's a proactive endpoint solution powered by Deep Instinct's advanced AI and Lima Charlie's SecOps cloud platform. Deep Instinct uses deep learning to predict and block threats like zero-day attacks, while Lima Charlie provides flexible security operations and EDR capabilities. Combined with BLOKWORX 24/7 SOC monitoring, this endpoint solution delivers strong around-the-clock protection with both advanced tech and human oversight. Matt, I know you are the MAED guru, so feel free to add on to it prior to us switching to the next service.
Oh, do you want me to do that now?
Yeah, go on, run with it.
Oh, okay. Well, we have the capability to leverage the best endpoint defense that's on the market right now. Sorry to those of you that use other vendors, specifically ones that blue screen your machines, but it's inferior. Our stuff will prevent things that they don't even see. Our EDR capabilities include the ability to actually monitor the health of the agents and the ability to remediate things that are broken without you having to send somebody to a machine, which is extremely helpful. Saves you time, saves you money. We do threat hunting, which is fun. And we validate the efficacy of all of our solutions regularly. So, most vendors will say, well, we provide coverage for X. Cool. When's the last time you tested against that? Or better yet, since you're using content-based files, content files can't get too large, otherwise they're unwieldy. So what did you remove from the content that's now able to be leveraged against you? Those are the things that we look at. And because we don't use a content file, we still prevent things from 10 years ago. Even further, we still prevent things back from when CryptoWall and CryptoLocker were first making their debut in this lovely landscape. There's others that, because those threats have not been around in such a long time, they don't look for the behavior. All somebody has to do is take that same payload, set up a C2 server, and they can reuse the same outdated technology or outdated attacks. We prevent those. Others don't. Anti-malware, that kind of falls along with antivirus. It's kind of one and the same. If you can't prevent viruses, then you're probably not preventing malware. So pretty straightforward on that one. Let's see. SIM/SOAR, Mike, I'll let you take care of that. And for file integrity monitoring, that's something that we've actually built in custom to our EDR that others do not have. And the one thing that I will say is our EDR is not like other EDRs. Other EDRs, you get an EDR that, does the E for the endpoint, sometimes does the D for the detection, in most cases completely misses the R. Well, in our case, we have the endpoint, we have the detection, and we have two R's, response and remediation. So we have the capability with custom rule sets that we are building to take action on things to make your lives easier. Whereas most will tell you that there's something there, and then they will send you something saying, here's what you need to do. Cool. Well, I'm so glad that I pay a company to be a tattletale, but not actually do any of the work. Those are the ones that you send to the corner, put the dunce cap on, and say, okay, when you get a little bit smarter and you can do things, you can rejoin the rest of society. But that's not going to happen, because having a modular based EDR is a lot of lift. Most companies won't have the capabilities to actually go through there and design something from the ground up purely for that level of usage. And it's not saying that they don't want to. It comes down to the client base. Most people want an easy bake oven. We don't. We like things that we can customize. We like things that we can tailor to ensure that you guys are set to the exact level of security that you should have. We're not going to give you soggy brownies or muffins. We're going to give you artisanal muffins and brownies, the high quality stuff. We're talking, you're going to get those muffins that have the little crumble on top of it. I don't know what it's called. I guess it's a streusel or something. I don't know. All I can tell you is it's the high quality fancy stuff. And that's what our EDR provides, is that capability, because we can customize it to look for things that nobody else is able to look for. To give you guys an example, you have your endpoint program that you're putting on for security, for AV, anti-malware, whatever you want to call it at this time. You have your EDR that's getting on there, but your EDR is basically monitoring the exact same things that your endpoint program should be monitoring. Now, mind you, in case one of them misses, that's fantastic. The other, in theory, should be able to notify you that there was a miss and what to do with the next steps. But what about the things that it's not designed to monitor for, that your endpoint isn't designed to prevent against? There's some things that, let's be honest, an AV solution cannot necessarily wrap its head around, like browser extensions. Browser extensions are generally written in a language that is able to be executed by the browser itself, but you cannot execute it natively on a Windows machine standalone without it going through the browser in the first place, because it has to load that into its resources to make it work. Well, our EDR has the capability to look for extensions that are being installed that are rogue, that you don't want to have there. There are countless extensions that are out there right now that masquerade themselves as a legitimate utility, but it's not. It's doing all kinds of stuff on the back end. So that's how we do it. We talk about layers. We have layers upon layers upon layers. We are basically the dude from Florida that made the mistake of taking a trip to Nova Scotia in the deepest part of winter. That's how many layers we have on right now. I see Mike's over there laughing. He's like, how dare you call me out? But that's what we have. That's why we have that. And that's what you're going to find is a theme with everything we talk about today. The layering aspect of what we have and why it's a necessity with all of our solutions.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Matt. I think it's also important to note that we don't really set and forget things or just let automatic emails really go in. And we'll talk deeper on that with our SOC services as well further down the line. So, well, now that we've kind of got the format, let's move on to the next service on the tool belt, and that is SCUD+CDR. Mike, why don't you take this one on for us?
Yeah, sure thing. And similar to what Matt was kind of speaking to thematically, defense in depth in the form of layers is going to be common here, simply because there are in the scope of each of these solutions we've talked about, there are multiple tools, there are multiple vendors that we reach out to, that we hold accountable to delivering as intended, very similar to a full scope service that you would receive either for home security installs, whether it be landscaping, right? Those individuals show up with the tools, the hardware, the platforms, and the service to kind of weave it all together. And I think that's really BLOKWORX's strong suit when it comes to finding an elegant way of 8 to 12 different platforms, 8 to 12 to even 15 sometimes different tools, harmonizing in a way that the landscape also changes. And so we need to be able to build on our existing stack in a way that harmonizes with the landscape, not just each other, not just the tools that we wield, but also the types of threats we're seeing. And so specifically, SCUD+CDR is email cloud SaaS security. So what we're providing in the scope of this service is email filtering in the form of anti-spam, anti-phishing. We have business email compromise prevention mechanisms in place. So that's similar to that credit card company or debit card company that you currently bank with that may stop or decline a transaction if they see some form of behavioral analytic that is out of baseline. You go to a gas station in a town you don't normally frequent, and you swipe it inside to get a snack. You swipe it at the pump, and they see 2 swipes from an unknown location within a few minutes of each other we'll say over $50, over $100, whatever the threshold is. What are they going to do? Well, they're going to decline the charge. They're going to notify you, and they're going to try and lock out whatever potential threat is there. That type of cadence and rhythm is very similar to how our SOC interacts in the scope of email security. So if we see a login event that's unsuccessful, and then we see the user fail multi-factor authentication 5 times within 10 minutes, we'll say, as an example, we have the capability to lock that account, log it out of wherever else it's logged into, and fire that alert off to our service partner, who most often is going to be handling the communication with the user themselves. We don't typically work with users directly. So if you're listening to this and you're like, hey, it sounds like I need BLOKWORX in my mother-in-law or my father's life or my grandfather's life or whoever it is, and we are specifically a channel-only model partnership. So if you're an IT team, if you're an IT administrator, and you provide those services to clients, that is specifically who we partner with. So if you are an end user, if you are an executive listening to this and saying, hey, we're getting owned as it pertains to email, we have users clicking on links that are not legitimate, we have users logging in from places that are all over the world because the office is no longer a 4-dimensional single location. It is everywhere. It is wherever they can be connected to. And the closest cell tower, the closest Wi-Fi, that's the office now, right? And so a lot of people have reached out. And so I would say contact your system administrator, contact those responsible for your IT department, your IT service, and say, hey, I was listening to some of what BLOKWORX has been saying over the past 12 to 18 months in the scope of the safety brief. Turns out they do provide services that are prevention-centric, that are actionable, and that's kind of what we're doing here. It's specific to email. But it doesn't just stop at email. We are looking at things such as more of a nuisance security threats. And what is that? That's spam. That's just, it's not maybe malicious in nature. It's somebody's trying to sell something, and a lot of people are out there trying to sell something, And so more so than, hey, threat is introduced more than just explicit bad guys, right? And so I think threat could be, I missed an important email because I'm inundated with spam, or I can't even get work done because I'm getting so much email that is creating fatigue for me as an employee trying to filter through, and it's just a lot. And so, downtime comes in many different shapes and forms to a business, and this is ultimately the cloud SaaS and email prevention suite against downtime. And that, again, includes everything from Office 365 environments. We're monitoring not just email, but also OneDrive files, SharePoint files, and Teams communication that includes like a file being shared or a link being shared in Teams. We're not as much monitoring the text-based chat of Teams as much as what is being shared in Teams in way of leading somebody out of the Teams application to a website or to a link or to a installer, right? And so we're monitoring all of that. So very comprehensive ecosystem there specific to Office 365. One thing that is candidly rising in popularity, whether people maybe acknowledge it or not, is Google Workspace. We've seen a lot of the industry migrate off of on-prem and hosted cloud to their own Office 365 instance. Microsoft's made it accessible, but Google's up in their game. Google is upping their game exponentially when it comes to security and business friendliness to business email. Mind you, that also includes Google Drive for business. So if you have files in Google Drive used in a business application, that is also something we're able to monitor, as well as Gmail for business. Unfortunately, as much as I'd love it to throw it on my own mom's Gmail account, that's free. Unfortunately, no capability there, but does require that business tier of Google Workspace and Office 365. So I think that covers feature, that covers compatibility. We talked about a practical use case of in which instance would our SOC reach out to one of our partners with a sample event, what would that look like as far as expectations go? And mind you, we're using multiple different tools and platforms here, harmonizing them in a single pane of glass that is able to say, hey, I saw this email get prevented at this life cycle, but then I saw this login event executed after that email was deleted. Some of this to a security threat researcher has merit when it's held next to each other, rather than, hey, I just have one tool monitoring one aspect. We have a whole suite that we bring with us. So within the scope of the service, you have the tools that we've standardized on, our engineers that are monitoring this 365, 24/7, as well as what Matt was saying is the development of new threat engine rules and threat detection rules that are just built over time, saying, hey, it's one thing to have somebody come out and maybe water your lawn, but now, hey, we're not just watering the lawn. We're looking at what threats may exist based on the season, based on the time of year, based on the weather, and also actively working to thwart those as well. So for those green thumbs out there that care very much about your lawn, maybe that analogy stands in the cyber realm, but if not, let it roll off the back. So, but that's going to be SCUD+CDR as far as cloud SaaS and email prevention.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Mike. And before moving on to our next service, I wanted to also break down what the acronym actually means. So SCUD+CDR stands for Secure Cloud Unified Defense plus Cloud Detection and Response. Just for anyone curious as to what the acronym actually stands for as well. All right, moving on. Another key service provided by BLOKWORX is SNIPR, or SNPR. It stands for Secure Network Perimeter Response. Mike, feel free to go ahead and break down this service for us a little bit.
Surely. So where we previously talked about email, cloud, software as a service, by the way, is SaaS, software as a service, SaaS. A lot of acronyms in this space. If you're just listening for the first time and you're like, I don't know what I signed up for, but there's a lot of information, right? In cybersecurity, there is a lot of acronyms used, this shortening of terms, if you will. SD-WAN is a great one. IPsec VPN is another one, right? I'm looking at all of these. Most of these are acronyms, DNS, IDS, IPS. But mainly what SNIPR is focused on is securing the network. When we say that, we mean from the firewall perspective, from the layer 3 perspective, but with also full layer 7 applications. So what does this practically mean? So everybody listening to this right now has a device of some form going through a router to get them from their home network, their work network, or their phone to the internet, the greater internet for connectivity, right? And so there is most often a device that handles that exchange. Think of it as a crossing guard, right? You're going from one side to the other, and that device is maybe what is provided to you at home from your ISP. Maybe you've gone to Costco or somewhere and bought your own, and you have that hooked up in your own house to handle that. Maybe you're in a business application and you know what a firewall is and you understand that. But the firewall function is specifically securing traffic that is unsecured by nature. And whether we like it or not, the internet today is all plain text. It is all open code. The internet, when it was created, was not created in a secure manner. It was built to connect things to each other. And it does indeed do that, but by the nature of how it's built, the blueprints are on the walls, right? It's very open source and very open text, plain text, as we say. And so what we need is some form of barrier that, we talked about that crossing guard, right? How do we go from one way to the other? Is one way to filter out what is bad and keep what is good. And so that network appliance is most often a physical device, maybe a little bit larger than a Kindle in some applications, and then it's other times it's very large. It's larger than a normal desktop computer. But ultimately what it handles is that air traffic control of who's coming in, who's coming out, what connections are being made. It is air traffic control and your crossing guard all in one. And where you see functions such as IDS, IPS, historically, there has been a separate second physical appliance put in between the firewall and the network to serve as that crossing guard. So where the router would handle air traffic control, the crossing guard would be able to say, yeah, you're allowed to cross. No, you're not allowed to cross. You can cross now, don't cross now, right? And it would keep that at bay as far as threats go. what we've done is we've partnered with Palo Alto Networks, which is a firewall vendor, next generation firewall vendor, that has built security into the fabric of networking so that there's a harmonious merging of those two in a single appliance. So you have multiple devices going to one simple appliance. You have better ROI. You're not managing 3 to 5 different functions in the network stack. As well as the beauty of this feature is BLOKWORX manages the network for you, almost like a network administrator in a box as well. So rather than just look at it as a, hey, they're coming out here, they're installing a fence, it's like, no, there's a fence and a security guard on your property at all times, monitoring this so that, yes, the security posture increases, but also the resilience and readiness against a threat, against attack, is also bolstered. So some practical things that that maybe translate a little easier, other than network functions, obviously, that are covered, are something like remote access VPN. A lot of people have caught on to what VPNs are, and they maybe use them more often than they know them and know what they are. But essentially, a VPN is taking your network connection and connecting it somewhere that you are not. Okay, so that could be you're out of the office, you're at home, you're trying to VPN into work. That's great. You could be overseas and you're trying to watch March Madness basketball, and so you're VPNing back to the United States to try and watch that, right? But the whole concept is you are tunneling yourself from one location to the other. And historically, this is a security advantage that comes with performance disadvantages. Okay, so you sometimes see a reduction of speed, a reduction in performance as far as network quality goes. Maybe you're streaming 4K and you hop on a VPN and now it's 480p or whatever it is, right? 720p. And so what we've seen with Palo is how we've able to configure it is you have an identical match in the performance as if you're physically there in the office or if you're at home, depending on your speed of connectivity, obviously. But there's incredible performance from a remote access standpoint while not sacrificing the security component of it. Also, other features are things such as content filtering based on category or policy, right? Let's say you're a system administrator and you want to keep users from websites that maybe lack proper hygiene from a security posture standpoint, regardless of what their subject matter may be. They typically aren't secured very well. And so they could be governmental websites. They could be gambling websites, right? Anything of the sort. You can pick that category and say, as an administrator, as the shepherd of this environment, I need to keep out this type of thing, but make sure that this type of thing is included, right? So all business approved applications are allowed through, but it is categorically set up on an app by app basis by our team. So if you can be as specific and say, allow Netflix, don't allow Instagram, allow Facebook, don't allow TikTok, you know, or you can deny all of those, in which case in the workplace probably wouldn't be a bad idea. And so, but the beauty of that is not just the granularity of control, is you also get really incredible network insights. So you get these reports generated routinely that say, hey, in the past 30 days or 90 days, you've had 48 terabytes of Netflix downloaded. Now, if you're a system administrator and you're getting concerns or reports of slowness on the network, then you get a report like this. Well, maybe if we stop everybody streaming Netflix over lunchtime, maybe the network won't come to a crawl, right? It's just these visibility points that historically we haven't had, similar to if you've ever done any DIY work around the house. Once the drywall and the paint and the plaster is up, you can't see through that wall, right? You got to cut it open. You got to get in there. It's very hard to see. So ultimately, this kind of platform gives incredible visibility to network activity, for troubleshooting, for optimization. But mind you, you also get the BLOKWORX SOC and networking team included in this. And so, you know, if there's a network change needing to be made, adds, moves, changes are included in the scope of this service, obviously within reason. And yeah, it's a fully exhaustive service. So whereas we were layering a incredible suite of controls around email and cloud software as a service, this is the fabric of the networking, all of the security tied into it, as well as the care and feeding for that network. Meaning if there is a change needed, let's say there's a new telephone provider coming in or a new security camera provider coming in, and there are some changes needed on the network, you have the BLOKWORX team ready and able to assist for requests such as that, with hopefully something more than immediate notice, right? Like, oh, hey, we just pulled out all the cameras, right? Like, we obviously
He'll come up now.
Yeah, I need to schedule all that, but you know, this is a way that, you know, we can make things work and connect to each other without sacrificing the security posture. And most have to pick one of those camps. They typically don't have both.
Well, that was a wonderful breakdown, Mike. I appreciate you taking the time for that. And I love the analogy of having the fence and the security guard. Reminds me of my onboarding interview where I think Mike Tarango introduced the sword and the samurai analogy, which has always
Right.
stuck with me. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
Indeed.
So our final flagship service is MVAP, which stands for Managed Vulnerability Assessment Platform. It's a proactive service designed to identify, assess, and prioritize vulnerabilities across your network. It provides continuous scanning and detailed reporting to ensure potential security gaps are discovered before they can be exploited. With MVAP, BLOKWORX helps organizations kind of stay ahead of threats by offering tailored insights and actionable recommendations, ensuring that vulnerabilities are managed and mitigated efficiently. Mike, Matt, did y'all have anything else to add on MVAP?
Oh, I tried adding stuff on MVAP at one point, and it did not go very well at all.
So
There are still photos of that somewhere out on the sphere. So I'll let
it's all
Mike talk
good.
about it.
It's all good. Um, the reason this is easier to explain is my wife and I navigated this kind of exercise as a family recently. So we purchased a home in May. So early spring is when we started our search. And there's so many things with a home, and the analogy simply is the home could be any form of environment, right? It could be a network, a server farm to manage, a bunch of users, laptops and desktops to administer and care for. But you really don't get a good, standardized read on the hygiene and the health and the wellness of a home, right? It's very subject to the home inspector's interpretation. Like obviously there are sections that we want to see the foundation, we want to see the roof, we want to see the water heater. Like there are certainly things that you'll get on most home inspections, but mileage may vary. Sometimes you'll see home buyers contract 2 to 3 inspectors because they want multiple points of insight here. And so where MVAP fits in is we effectively are able to come into an environment and provide a exhaustive approach, so much so that where a home inspector may be limited to looking at what they can with an already assembled home, this functionally x-rays the entire environment. We are not really marred or blocked by typical barriers of visibility as other vulnerability assessment platforms are. And the science behind this and why this works is because we use a 3-vector approach. So we look at the network from the outside looking in. We call this an external scan or a cloud scan. So we're looking at the firewall, we're looking at any websites that the company may have or any public-facing applications or whatever they may have that's accessible from the internet. We're looking at it as a bystander. We're not in the environment, we're not on the environment's network, we're not in the office. The second approach that we take is looking at the home from within the home, right? And so we have a physical collector appliance we provide under the scope of this service. There's no additional cost, right? It's all included. And specifically what we have is the ability to scan not just network connected, servers, computers, and things like that, but not all things have a keyboard and mouse, and not all things can be installed too. So what about the iPad used for scheduling as a kiosk in the front office? What about all the security cameras that surely have vulnerabilities, but we can't log into and maybe check for? What about the copier that's been there? Bless it, for the past 12 years, and it's never been dusted. It just shoots paper and dust out in equal volumes, right? Like there's all these network connected elements that aren't, people don't think of them as connected devices because they don't have a keyboard and mouse. Well, guess what? The fridge in the break room, the vending machine that can tell you the weather, all of these are connected to the network, and all of these present vulnerabilities. And so the Echo Dot, the Apple HomePod, the Amazon Echo, Amazon Echo we already talked about, the Google HomePod, all of these things. Anything that connects to the internet is introducing risk. And so what we have the ability to do is scan every device from a vantage point that is equal and identical from within the environment. So in addition to that, the third and final approach that we use is a host-based scanner. So that is a physical application that you'll install on a laptop, install on a desktop, install on a server, that gives you the specific OS versioning, vulnerabilities and things present there local to the machine. Meaning if a threat actor got on that machine, what could they do? rather than if they got on a machine next to it, what could they do to a machine sitting next to them, right? And so, but we monitor this in a very cohesive way. There's incredible reporting that's generated based on that baseline. And the way that I kind of equivocate this is, it's one thing if, Matt and I get a new gym membership and we walk in and they say a part of the welcome package, we're going to take a baseline health assessment, right? And so they're going to give me my goals, they're going to give Matt his goals, and then they're going to say, all right, go on and get. But that's most vulnerability scans, is they're going to tell you what you need to work on and then peace out. MVAP is more so an assessment and personal trainer. And whereas we want to see people improve upon the results in the report, so much so that this is a continual service, we certainly offer one-time scans for those that are interested, but we tell you how to fix the vulnerabilities, how to plug the gaps in risk, rather than just tell you they exist and let you figure it out, right? And so, again, removes the amount of cycles needed, and most often in a home inspection type vulnerability scanning approach, so much so that the home inspector will say, hey, your hot water heater is, 8 years old. That's the vulnerability. That's the observation. But rather they can say, hey, this is a 58-gallon water heater. What I'd recommend you do is you go to Home Depot, you go to Menards, you go to wherever, buy this specific make and model, because this is equivocal in the size, in the heat speed, and the water flow. This is exactly what you need to do to resolve this issue. It makes it mindless. It makes it so easy. It's like, I know exactly what I have to do. I know exactly how much I need to spend. And that is often missing in vulnerability scans. Certainly, to some degree, some vulnerability scans talk about it, but it is not to the degree that maybe we hold our standard to. And so that's why this was a little, this is very recent. I'd say July last year is really when MVAP was really finalized. And so one of the newer menu items, if you will, but this makes, how do I harden this network? How do I really get an X-ray vision into the environment from an exhaustive standpoint? This is where this fits.
I know. Thank you for that, Mike. And I think it's also really cool that we give those detailed response, because you essentially, again, get that samurai. You get to step into the mind of the BLOKWORX experts instead of just getting an alert of, hey, this is broken. We give you the steps on how to fix it, where to go, and all that jazz. So thank you so much for breaking that down. So the services we just covered, MAED+EDR, SCUD+CDR, Sniper, and MVAP are some of our most widely used or known from BLOKWORX services. So let's switch gears and discuss some of the lesser known but equally important services. Those are MXDR, that stands for Managed Extended Detection and Response, and CMND, that stands for Cloud Managed Network Defense. Can you break down how these services provide a helping hand to our flagship services, and more importantly, to our SOC team who rely on them for deeper dives into security incidents?
Most definitely. Yeah. So where these fit in, and this will be brief simply because the use case can be so wide. MXDR is effectively, we have a partner with some form of security mechanism, security platform in play, but they don't have anyone maybe keeping watch or someone keeping tabs on what is happening, right? And this is the best way I could say this is, you have a doorbell camera, but nobody's watching it, and so you've done the work of buying the thing, installing the thing, and running the thing, but candidly, whatever happens at your front door, there's no control over it, right? If nobody's monitoring it, there's no response. There's just, I have evidence that somebody stole that package, but that was 2 days ago. It's very in the past as far as security operations go. And so with this, you get a live look of footage, if you will, that's coming from various platforms. And this is obviously subject to data source and log fidelity and integrity and things like that. But we are able to ingest certain types of data streams into our same platform and then provide intelligence, even sometimes predictive intelligence, being able to say, hey, we know what the cyber attack life cycle and kill chain look like. We know what has to happen before an attack can take place. Maybe that's what we're seeing, and we can predict that somewhat more reliably maybe than weathermen, but they keep their jobs, and they marry on right along. And so, but that's specifically where MXDR comes in, is having a platform that we leverage in the scope of all of our other services. Mind you, it's the same exact platform, but this is a little bit more flexible into ingesting maybe platforms and data streams that we don't deploy in the scope of our service. certainly more on that, but welcome any further discussion for those that are interested on MXDR. Pivoting to command, SASE is another one of those incredible acronyms. If you're on here and you're like, this is too many acronyms, I can learn I could pass my state's bar test quicker as a lawyer than I could learn all these acronyms. You're probably right, due to how many there are. But effectively what you're looking at is being able to secure network activity wherever the user may go. Now, it sounds obvious, right? But really 2018, 2019, 2020, we saw a large influx of users for obvious reasons pivot out of the office, out of the physical workspace to, like I said, wherever their laptop could be online from or wherever their tablet could be online from. And so with this, it is an agent-based solution that deploys to their machine. It is typically most advertised SASE as a hardware-less or a firewall-less service. To some degree, this is marketing. To some degree, this is truth. And I'll leave the experts listening to this to kind of decipher how much of one percentage as it is to another. But effectively, you have a relay that connects you to a firewall in the cloud. So just like we talked about with firewalls and that crossing guard and air traffic control and everything that's happening there, it migrates the security monitoring to the cloud, but then connects you right to that portal, right? And so rather than having to be in the office or having to have a firewall in the office, that is typically where we see SASE come in. There are certainly overlap in functions, but if you are a fully remote, fully distributed workforce that does not deploy firewalls to all of your, we'll say technicians or hardworking people in the field that have like truck computers or mobile devices, and then you have some at home, SASE is a really good solution for fully distributed workforces that don't have a physical location.
I think another thing to think about as well is even if you do provide the VPNs to the company provided endpoints, you're going to have those one or two who have their own personal laptops
Certainly.
or iPads or cell phones that are also connecting to work-based content. And that's where this is really important.
Certainly. And we see SASE solutions really in two, as far as larger, well-known verticals. We see it a lot in education. We see it a lot specifically to like fleet machines under an educational, like a college or school, maybe lower school, secondary school, that have devices that go home with the users, primarily students. They are certainly common there. Again, it really just comes down to where is the device going to go? Do we have accountability over where the device will be? And if not, how do we safeguard it as it travels and connects to various resources? So SASE is very common in those applications.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Mike.
Yeah.
And just to be respectful of our time, I'm going to combine the last two questions together. Obviously, we can't forget about the BLOKWORX 24/7 SOC. The SOC is really the glue that holds everything together. They help reduce alert fatigue as we handle monitoring, tuning, and alerting our partners when necessary. So can you explain how the SOC combines into all of our services and plays a crucial role? And then also how all of our services come together to make a cohesive tool belt?
Yeah, those are excellent questions. And I loved the graphic of the tool belt because it implies that you can't get every job done with a hammer. Like there are very certain types of security threats, just like there are certain types of projects around the house, and some certainly you could do with a hammer. You could do a lot with a battery drill. I will say you could do a lot of projects with a battery drill, and I almost see that as endpoint defense because it really follows the user machine wherever they go. And but even email does a lot. But I think, again, the readiness and resilience against threat requires a preparedness, right? And so being able to have an exhaustive, deep roster of solutions that harmonize with one another. Mind you, none of these solutions are codependent, meaning we have partners that are just using, they're like, hey, I love BLOKWORX, they make great battery drills, right? Hey, I love BLOKWORX, they make great email security, right? And again, for the sake of the analogy, you could go to DeWalt, you could be a Milwaukee zealot, you could be a Makita zealot or Ryobi or whatever your preferred vendor is. But typically over time, you recognize that certain vendors are going to put out something that is their thing. They still makes the best chainsaws or whatever it is, right? And so like that, we leverage that same mindset in our security stack. So partners come to us looking at, hey, if anybody's got a good read on who's doing what the best, it's BLOKWORX, because they play with these tools all the time. They test these tools all the time. Matt and his team really full time as far as their 9 to 5 is testing the efficacy of these tools against threats, just constantly testing it. And very similar to maybe like bulletproof vests, and hey, there's a new caliber of ammunition coming out. Now we got to test our vests. How effective is it at stopping such a thing, right? And so that continual R&D, that research and development, is something most companies, enterprises, and even vendors seldom don't put the proper budget into. You know, they say, hey, this is what we've stopped. We've stopped 380. We've stopped 9 mil. If it can stop a 9 mil, I'm sure it can stop a 300 black. No, we're like, let's get it out to the range. It's going to cost us a couple $1,000s in plates, but we're going to see it right now. How does it stand up, right? And so for the firearm enthusiasts, you know what I'm talking about caliber-wise. If I lost you, I'm sorry. But mainly there is different types of threats that are always evolving, and we have to be resilient. And the only way we can know that we're resilient against them is to test them constantly. And so love that we have Matt on our team and everybody that accompanies him and the functions that they fulfill. But really, that's where it all fits. You know, they certainly overlap. They are very much like armor plates that will kind of waterfall over one another. But the main point is cyber risk is all a percentage. No different than if you are inclined to certain health genetic diseases. There is a percentage of risk there. But risk can be mitigated. And it can be tangibly and measurably mitigated. And that's kind of where we exist, is to defend livelihoods against these threats and to mitigate that risk as much as possible. And like we said, there's multiple tools to do that, you know. And so hopefully that demonstration and overview, kind of the tour of the house, if you will, been a fun couple streams these past week. You got to hear the origin story of BLOKWORX a couple weeks back. If you didn't hear the one with Rob, highly recommend you go back and catch that episode. That was I'd say wholesome in the cybersecurity space. You don't get to hear a lot of stories like that. And so kind of where we started, how we got our origin story as a team. But really today was the tour of the house. Hey, how do we do what we do? And how do we deliver service specific to each and every type of avenue where threat is often delivered? So hopefully that was helpful.
No, I love the analogy you gave there. I was thinking tool belt in that sense, but not that deeply in a sense. So no, I'm really glad that you broke that down. And I like how you brought up the fact that we never assume that we prevent or are safe against something. That's something that I've noticed when anything comes out, we're full on testing and making sure, and CYA always. So, well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you again, Mike and Matt, for breaking down the BLOKWORX Toolbelt today with me. We covered a lot. So if you want to learn more about these services, go ahead and head over to blockworks.com, where all of the acronyms and full service names are listed under the Prevention Services tab in our menu. Explore the site, and then if you have any questions when you're finished, feel free to go over to the Contact Us page and ask away. Again, thank you for tuning into this episode of the Safety Brief. Don't forget to share this with your network, and we'll catch you next time for more insights in keeping your organization safe and secure. Thanks again. Stay frosty.
Thanks all.